Well, the tragic shootings in South Carolina reignite the passionate debate about gun control. We'll take a deeper look next. It being Saturday night, it's time to take a deeper look at guns in America. As the nation continues to mourn the tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina, the issue of guns in America is again squarely in our collective focus. According to a joint study by Harvard and Northeastern universities between 2011 and 2013, there was a mass shooting in the U.S. once every 64 days. Earlier this week, President Obama said such rampages are becoming all too common. Studies have shown an immediate spike in firearm background checks in the aftermath of mass shootings. It has happened since the mass killings in Columbine, Colorado, and following the Newtown tragedy. Gun store owners say they have also seen a rise in sales in the days after the Charleston, South Carolina shooting rampage. Courtney Keeley has this report.
All right, firearm ready, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Ticket sales to gun shows like this one in Northern Virginia and interest in buying weapons soared after the Newtown, Connecticut shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School that killed 20 young students and 6 staff members.
The only thing that'll stop a bad guy with a gun, in my opinion, is a good guy with a gun.
Responsible gun owners absolutely have the right to keep and bear arms in a safe and responsible manner.
Gun sales do rise after a mass shooting, but self-protection is only part of the reason. A bigger factor, according to gun shop owners, is the immediate talk of gun control legislation by politicians. After the Newtown killing, the FBI reported its top 10 busiest days for background checks. In fact, the FBI's highest periods of firearm background checks all occur immediately after a mass shooting. Gun sales figures are not systematically reported, so background check requests are the best overall indication of a spike in sales.
It's a pretty dramatic spike.
Michael Lamka said his company has seen sales on his online store of gun magazines dramatically increase after the killings in Charleston.
When the events of Charleston started going on, you could see the online spike in traffic to our site, and it usually continues for a decent amount of time. I would say sales yesterday and today are double what they are on a typical day. And you'll see that continuing on probably for the next week or so, and then you'll start to see it trail off.
Suffice it to say, gun control remains a hot-button issue. Joining us to take a deeper look at gun control is Jonathan Hudson. He's the Chief Communications Officer at the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. Mr. Hudson joins us from Washington, D.C. And from Atlanta, we're joined by Jerry Henry. He's the Executive Director of Georgia Carry, a nonprofit organization that supports the Second Amendment, i.e. the right of Americans to bear arms. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Let's just go down the list. Columbine, Virginia Tech, Newtown, now Charleston. The list could go on. Can we ever get out of this cycle of gun violence? If so, how are we going to do that? Jerry, you first.
Well, gun control does not work. It hasn't worked and it will not work. The biggest problem we have facing us right now are gun-free zones. Our government disarms people in those gun-free zones and takes away any ability to protect themselves. Anyone can walk in there with any type of weapon and have a field day.
Jonathan, what do you say?
Brady background checks work. Since the Brady law was passed with bipartisan support in 1994, it has blocked more than 2.4 million dangerous people from getting their hands on guns. We know that every day 88 Americans die by gunfire, and most of these tragedies are preventable by common sense solutions like Brady background checks to keep guns out of the wrong hands, measures supported by the vast majority of Americans and even by 85% of gun owners. So the problem is not law-abiding citizens carrying guns. The problem is not that people should have guns taken away. We can all agree that people have the right to own guns and law-abiding people can carry guns. The problem is that we can all agree on the solution is to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people.
Okay, well, you both mentioned gun control. Let's bring up a statistic we had pre-made for us, and let's take a look. Since 2000, Gallup has been asking Americans whether they think gun control laws should be stricter. The answer is they don't, and that probably doesn't surprise either one of you. Less than half of Americans say they favor stricter legislation regarding the sale of firearms. 38% say the law should stay as they are. 14% believe they should be made less stringent. So, Gentlemen, to both of you, most of the time what's happened in these mass shootings is that there's been a lot of talk about gun control legislation, and then the talk sort of dies away. Given that last graphic, does it seem safe to say that that's what's going to happen this time? Jonathan?
Well, John Henry, the fact is that most gun owners agree, 85% of gun owners agree, that Brady background checks should be expanded to all gun sales, including online and at gun shows, to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. There was a study released June 3 by the Johns Hopkins University Center for Gun Policy, and it said that 85% of gun owners believe in expanding Brady background checks to all gun sales. So there's not really a controversy here. The American public, even gun owners, have made up their minds that the solution is to keep guns out of the wrong hands.
Okay, well then I want to ask you about that. Then if that's the case, then why the resistance, it seems, to stricter gun and stricter background checks in Washington?
The resistance in Washington is because we have a Republican Congress filled with too many lapdogs who feel beholden to the cash coming from the corporate gun lobby and aren't representing the will of the voters who elected them to keep the public safe.
Jerry, what do you think about background checks?
Well, background checks, there was a background check run on Mr. Storm when he went and purchased his firearm in April. That didn't do anything to stop him from getting one. There were background checks run on the shooter at Virginia Tech, at the Aurora, Colorado shooting. And I don't buy the 85% of gun owners are for expanded background checks. If you look at what happened in 2012, I believe it was, there were a total out of 75,000 people who were turned down on a background check. There were 49 people that were prosecuted, which tells me that the background checks are not accurate, the records are not accurate, or the FBI or the ATF are not doing their jobs in stopping those people.
Jerry, I'm sorry. We got about a minute before we have to go to a piece real quick, but I wanted to run this by you. So you say, it sounds like you're saying that, well, heck, I mean, these background checks are inaccurate. They didn't stop other mass shootings. In some ways, does that attitude just fly in the face of what we typically hear from people on your side of the debate, that the only way to combat a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. If background checks don't identify the good guys, how do you identify it?
Well, you identify the good guy by the one that didn't commit the crime. The background checks, I didn't say they didn't work, but if you look at the money that's poured into them and the numbers that they're throwing at us as proof of how it works, that's not the case. The background checks that they want to extend to include private sales on background checks on private sales, and we're against that.
Okay. When it comes to gun control, things are very different in Japan. For one, handguns are banned, and there are very heavy restrictions on other weapons.
Whenever there is an incident involving guns, they make the regulations even more stringent.
I don't know if you were able to hear that piece, gentlemen. The piece was very good, very good. The piece is basically saying that in Japan, they don't have this type of violence. You hear that statistic thrown out there for other countries. I'm going to throw one more statistic at you. From this week's Washington Post, the Harvard Injury Control Research Center assessed the literature on guns and homicide and found that there's substantial evidence that indicates that more guns means more murders. And that seems to fly in the face of something that both of you have been communicating, that do we need less guns on why isn't taking some of the guns off the streets the answer? Jonathan, you first.
Well, John Henry, you're right. Where there are more guns, there are more gun deaths. The Center for Disease Control data shows that South Carolina has some of the weakest gun laws in the country, but their gun murder rate is 41% higher than the national average. South Carolina ranks number 5 among the states nationwide for gun homicide. So there's plenty of people with lots of guns, but the gun murder rate is incredibly high in South Carolina. That's not the solution. And the solution isn't like Japan, banning all guns from all people or even banning certain guns from all people. The solution is to ban all guns from certain people, the dangerous ones. The Brady law works because the background checks ban people that we can all agree shouldn't have a gun in their hands. Convicted felons, rapists, fugitives, drug users, domestic abusers, and the dangerously mentally ill from getting a gun in their hands. We can all agree on that. And most Americans, including most gun owners, do agree on that. We're waiting for Congress to do the job.
Okay, Jerry. Now, again, you talked a moment ago about gun-free zones, how you don't believe in them. It seems like your solution is that, no, we don't need fewer guns. We need more guns. We need guns everywhere. Why is that the solution as compared to taking some away?
I didn't say that. What
okay.
I said was,
I apologize.
What I said was that we need to do away with gun-free zones. That doesn't mean that everybody in there needs to have a gun, but that means that anybody that wants to go in there has to stop and think about whether someone is armed in those places or not. Now, a couple of statistics that were given there a while ago, 88 people do die a day of gunshot, but 59 of them are self-inflicted. And when you look at the people that were spelled out there by by John, is that his name? I'm sorry.
Jonathan, yes.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm sorry. If you look at the people that he listed, I agree. They don't need firearms, and they're not going to pass a background check, but they're going to get firearms because they're going to get them illegally from their street vendor. They're going to get them from stealing them. They will get a gun. Any criminal can get a gun, and they do get guns.
Well,
no, that's not how they're getting guns. They're getting guns by surfing the internet or cruising into gun shows and buying guns for cash, no questions asked. That's why, since Sandy Hook, we've stopped waiting for Congress to finish the job and expand Brady background checks to all gun sales, and we're starting to win. The momentum of the American people who've made up our minds is winning at the state level. 6 states since Sandy Hook's massacre in December 2012 have now passed expanded Brady background checks on all gun sales. Just last month, Oregon became the 6th state to do so since Sandy Hook. The 8th state, there are 8 states nationwide who have done so, and if you look nationwide, there are at least 18 states with some form of expanded Brady background checks. So it's time for Congress to do the will of the American people, finish the job to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people by expanding Brady background checks to all gun sales. They work.
And those laws that you just got through mentioning are not working because they are nothing more than a gun registration scheme. Now, if you can go back, I mean, you can go back and
by the way. Go ahead.
You can see several studies that have been done where they discuss with prisoners where they get their guns. You will find very, very few that will ever go to a gun show to do it. They will get them where they have been stolen off the streets. They will buy them on the black market.
Jonathan Hudson in Washington, D.C., Jerry Henry in Atlanta, thank you for what was a spirited debate on a very, very touchy subject here in the United States today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for having us.
Thank you, John Henry.